So I think a lot about doubt in the role of faith, particularly my own spiritual life. I've, as I've gotten older, I don't want to say I've gotten more cynical. Well, no, I'll say it. I've gotten more cynical. Um, but I think a lot about doubt because I've come to doubt lots and lots of things. Um, and I think it's a very important topic for us, especially as you used to consider because we're really a religious tradition that's much more concerned and interested in questions than we are in final and often easy answers to those big questions. I always want to have an echo thing there. Big questions, you but those we think about these big questions and we don't like easy answers. And in connection with the subject of doubt and faith, I've also been thinking about the subject of true believers, especially the past few years. There's a comic strip, not a very popular one. It's not in the Sunday papers. You have to find it online. And it's called Jesus and Mo. And in it, Jesus and Moses discuss various religious topics. And one of them illustrates what I want to say about true believers and doubt. Jesus asks Moses, Mo, do you ever have any doubts about your beliefs? And Moses replies, never. It's not because of a reluctance to think of man being alone in a meaningless universe, the accidental byproduct of a Darwinian algorithm indifferent to his fate, nor is it the fear of finality of death or of the terrifying unimaginability of oblivion. It's just that I could never admit to being so wrong for so long about something so important. To which Jesus replies, that's unthinkable, isn't it? Like some of you, perhaps, I was raised, as you know, in a religious tradition that was based on absolute certainty. The Bible was literally the Word of God. Its teachings were absolutely true, absolutely certain in every area. To question or to doubt that certainty was a sin, to doubt that certainty was a sin, one that, if persisted in, would no doubt lead a person astray and straight into the arms of the devil, who had placed that doubt in the person's mind to begin with. The story of Adam and Eve and their temptation by the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the placing of doubt about what they had been told about Yahweh, about the consequences of eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, was always held up to us, not only as a story about how sin came into the world, but how we too could easily be led astray by Satan if we allowed ourselves to doubt God or his word. We too would lose our salvation, just as they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and unless we repented, we would be cast into hell for our disbelief. And so I'll return to that idea of doubt later as opposed to disbelief. But that tradition that I grew up in isn't the only one in which doubt is viewed as sinful or as something to be avoided at all costs. In fact, most traditions don't encourage doubt, right? Some are not quite as dogmatic about it and allow that doubt is a normal part of the spiritual path and one's spiritual growth. But it must eventually give way to what is often referred to as a saving faith. And that's what that usually means, is that despite one's doubts, despite one's struggle with certain beliefs, even despite evidence presented that may challenge or contradict or even prove wrong a certain belief, one must finally just give up doubt and step out on faith and just believe. Now, I have to admit that there are times in life when we might need to do that, when we might want to do that. A few years ago, as you know, a doctor told me that I needed to have open heart surgery. And without it, I'd either have a stroke or a heart attack and likely die. Now, leading up to that statement, I had been suffering for months with what I just passed off as constant heartburn or acid reflux. And the shortness of breath was just because, well, I was out of shape. And as you all know, I've now gone back to my svelte, pre surgery body. Not really. I'm still not in shape. In any case, I knew that heart disease ran in my family and that I was a likely candidate too to have heart disease. But I doubted that this was what was happening because I was only 53 and I was way too young, and I held on to that doubt for a long time. But when the doctor told me the results of the tests I finally had taken and his diagnosis, that was the point where I had to let go of that doubt and step out on faith. And letting a person hack open your chest cavity, stop your heart, cut and paste together some arteries and valves, and then sew you back together again takes a lot of faith. For me, that was literally a saving faith moment. I had to be a true believer that the doctor knew what he was talking about. In that case, we were talking about a very obvious and observable issue, right? I had a bum heart that needed repair, but in the case of the larger issues, in the case of the big questions in life, the ones that many people consider spiritual life or death eternal questions, I think we use part ways with those true believers. Let me read to you something that I think illustrates what I'm saying. This is from the Kitab-i-Igan, in English called the Book of Certitude, the section called the Tablet of the True Seeker. And this is a sacred text from a different tradition. And it says, "O my brother, when a true seeker determines to take the step of search in the path leading unto the knowledge of the Ancient of Days, he must before all else cleanse his heart, which is the seat of the revelation of the inner mysteries of God, from the obscuring dust of all acquired knowledge." Forget everything you know. "And the illusions of the embodiments of satanic fancy. He must purge his breast, which is the sanctuary of the abiding love of the beloved, of every defilement, and sanctify his soul from all that pertaineth to water and clay, from all shadowy and ephemeral attachments. Only when the lamp of search, of earnest striving, of longing desire, of passionate devotion, of rapture and ecstasy is kindled within the seeker's heart, and the breeze of his loving kindness is wafted upon his soul, will the darkness of terror be dispelled, the mists of doubt and misgivings be dissipated, and the lights of knowledge and certitude envelop his being." No doubt allowed. The heart has to be purged of all doubt and replaced with absolute certitude. Anything that you knew before probably isn't true. Only that. True seeker, true believer, right? And I'm sure you've listened, as I have on occasion, as long as you could and as long as I could, to some fundamentalist Christian preachers on either YouTube or you see them on TV or something. But there was one I watched a while back, and he was preaching a sermon called "Doubt, the Sin God Hates Most." He's a true believer. He has what he believes is a saving faith. And I like it when they says that God hates something, you know. I've had people say to me, you know, God hates, and they start to say, and I say, wait, stop right there. I thought your Bible says God is love. You lost me at hate. For this minister, though, that I just referenced, doubt is the same as disbelief. But that's not the case. The original Latin word for doubt is dubitare, which means to question, to hesitate, to waver in opinion. It's related to the Latin dubius, meaning uncertain, to choose between two things, and further back, to be of two minds. In fact, in the King James Version of the Bible, the book of James says that a double-minded man, meaning one who doubts, is unstable in all his ways. What this minister does is confuse questioning and uncertainty with absolute disbelief. And then there are those pesky absolutes. Everything is black and white to him. There's no distinction in his mind between doubt and disbelief. It's absolute certainty or nothing at all. Now, even in Buddhism, there are true believers, Buddhists who say that others aren't true Buddhists because they have different views or doubt certain tenets. Many Buddhists say that the Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, form of Buddhism, which is the one that I lean towards most, uh, isn't true Buddhism because it doesn't have any outward practices. You don't have to meditate. You don't have to do the chanting. If you don't want to, you're allowed to, but you don't have to. And so they say that Shin Buddhists aren't true Buddhists, even though Shin Buddhism is the largest branch of Buddhism in Japan and in Asia. Stephen Batchelor, in his book Confessions of a Buddhist Atheist, writes this. He says, the problem with certainty is that it's static. It can do little but endlessly reassert itself. Uncertainty, by contrast, is full of unknowns, possibilities, and risks. But true believers aren't only found in religious circles, right? There are true believers in the political and medical and scientific and economic arenas. There are true believers when it comes to diet. The notion that there is only one true way and others are wrong cuts a very wide swath. And doubt is quite often viewed with suspicion and derision, ostracism, persecution, and even violence. Those who didn't fall in line with Lenin and Stalin, for example, with Hitler or Mussolini or Hirohito, those who disagreed with Nixon, with Mao, with Castro, well, we know what their fate was. You remember perhaps Nixon and Kissinger and McNamara and those who disagreed with them. Remember George Bush's words, if you're not with us, you're against us. True believers united behind him. And it's happening again today. We see it happening all the time, every day. The latest one, I think that's probably the most atrocious I've heard from the former president, is that Jews who vote Democratic are not real Jews, that they hate Judaism and they hate Israel. The only word I can think of to describe that is disgusting and ignorant. To doubt, to ask questions, and especially to give proof of the validity of those doubts is a dangerous thing. Saul Alinsky, perhaps you remember him, is a great community organizer and the author of Rules for Radicals, wrote in that book, the human spirit grows from that small inner light of doubt whether we are right, while those who believe with certainty that they possess the right are dark inside and darken the world outside them with cruelty, pain, and injustice. I would venture to say that we even have some true believers in our own liberal religious tradition, people who believe that it's the only real spiritual faith worth having. I don't think that anyone here believes that. We know people of other traditions, and we honor those and we respect those. So what role do faith and doubt play in our UU religious tradition? Do we have saving faith, as some true believers in other traditions say we must have? I believe we do have that saving faith, but I don't use that phrase to mean that we're saved in some supernatural way by a vicarious and atonement and cleansing of our sins to appease an angry God out there somewhere, or to gain entrance into some heavenly realm after we die. I believe that the saving faith we have as Unitarian Universalists is one that has everything to do with becoming fully human in the deepest sense, to be able to feel and experience the full range of emotion and compassion and kinship with all other human beings on the planet and with all sentient beings, to nurture the very best in each one of us, to live a life of service to each other, recognizing not only the uniqueness that each of us possesses, but the unity and oneness that we share as sparks of the divine evolutionary process. When we experience that kind of saving faith, we're compelled to share it with others, to work to bring about real and lasting change in our lives and the lives of those around us. That's what a saving liberal faith is about. And right alongside that saving faith, equally as important, is what I call the necessity of having a saving doubt. Our faith isn't one that requires blind acceptance of dogma and scriptures. To be sure, we read these and we honor them. We gain insight and even spiritual sustenance from them. But this is always done, or should be always done, with the reliance on a saving doubt, a critical mind, one that questions and tests and examines and re-examines just what the place, if any, these should hold in our lives. That the search for truth and meaning that we talk about. And this isn't only about religion or religious texts. If we're to be true to our UU heritage, we have to apply this saving doubt to the areas of science and politics and all aspects of our lives. Doubts, the Christian theologian Friedrich Buechner said, are the ants in the pants of faith. They keep it awake and moving. We live in a world that cries out for certainty, but that certainty, like security, is an illusion. The great majority of people want to have their answers given to them immediately, to know with certainty that their government is trustworthy, that the clothing they wear is the trendiest, the food they eat the most artisanal, that the kids are the smartest, the car they drive the fastest, and especially that their faith is the right one and that the answers to ultimate questions are all right there for them. All of those, though, are doubtful. We can't be absolutely sure of any of this. And to say that we are is really lying to ourselves. Remember what Mark Twain said, there are only two things that are for certain, death and taxes. And I believe that's true. This doesn't mean none of those things are true or that nothing is true. It just means that we have to question them. It means that as we live out our lives, as we are presented each day with the daily ups and downs, the daily struggles and joys of living, we need to honor our doubt as well as our faith. We will find things in life that we can be mostly certain of. Barring a sudden, unforeseen apocalyptic explosion, the sun will rise again tomorrow and will do the same thing for the next few billion years. We can be mostly certain of things like that. But always we ask questions. Always we honor the questions and the questioner. Holding this kind of liberal faith isn't easy. It's a faith of saving doubt. The book of James also says that faith without works is dead. I think it's also true that faith without doubt is just childish naivete. In a passage that many of you are familiar with from Letters to a Young Poet, the poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote this: "Have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. Try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books written in a foreign language. Do not look now for the answers. They cannot now be given to you because you could not live them. It is a question of experiencing everything. At present, you need to live the question. Perhaps you will gradually, without even noticing it, find yourself experiencing the answer some distant day. Your doubt can become a good quality if you train it, and it must become knowing. It must become criticism. Ask it whenever it wants to spoil something for you, why something is ugly. Demand proofs from it. Test it. And you will find it perhaps bewildered and embarrassed, perhaps also protesting. But don't give in. Insist on arguments and act in this way, attentive and persistent every single time. And the day will come when, instead of being a destroyer, your doubt will become one of your best workers, perhaps the most intelligent of all the ones that are building your life. This is the doubt of a spiritual, liberal faith, and I think of a fully lived human life itself. So I challenge you to cherish both yourself, your faith, and your doubt, and to let them nurture each other. May it be so.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.